Welcome to another legal talk right here on eRadio with myself, Jan, and also Hahn and Hahn attorneys. Today joined by a partner at the firm, Jaco Hamman. Jaco, it's nice to chat to you again. It's been a while. How are you doing?
Well, afternoon, Jan. Yeah, all the best. Yeah, thanks, man. Nice chatting to you as well.
So today talking about a construction guarantee. What on earth is a construction guarantee, Jaco?
Okay, so before I can answer that, we just first need to get some terminology right. So what do we call who in the construction industry? So firstly, the builder, the guy that builds, we call him a contractor. Now, the contractor then builds for a person or a company, and that person or company we call an employer. So normally when you talk about an employer, it be your employer in the labor case and that sort of thing, your boss. But in construction industry, the boss, the one who owns the land and wants to develop on, we also call him an employer. So whenever you talk to contractors and they talk about employer, not talking about their boss, they're talking about the owner or the developer. Now, that employer will, in most instances, especially if it's now a big development like an estate or a high-rise building or even a quite an expensive residential property, will have an agent. Now, depending on the type of contract you enter into, which I'll just briefly touch on as well, that, let's call him agent, will have a different name. So if you are in a JBCC contract, you'll call him a principal agent, and if you are on a FIDI contract, you'll call him an engineer, and in an NEC contract, you'll call him a project manager. So in essence, what that means is that principal agent, he'll sign off documents on behalf of the employer. Now, that JBCC acronym that I used, and FIDIC and NEC, so in the construction industry, there are a couple of or various standardized contracts that the guys enter into. So it makes it a lot easier to people to know what they do and what do they have to do and what the terms is. So the contract that's probably most used in South Africa is the JBCC contract. So all your terms look exactly the same in the contract. And then, of course, you've got your variables to say what it is that you have to build, by when do you have to build, and that sort of thing. But what also makes it a lot easier is that because it's standardized contract, there's a lot more case law on it. So if you're in a JBCC contract and something happens, it's easier to go and say, okay, but what has the court ruled on in the past on the JBCC contract, or arbitrators or that sort of thing. So now back to the construction guarantee. So the employer, he now wants to build, and he now appoints a contractor, let's say in terms of the JBCC contract. Now that employer wants some sort of guarantee from the contractor that if something goes wrong, the employer will be covered. Now, there's about two main types of guarantees that you'll get in this instance. And the one is the construction guarantee, which we'll discuss at length. And the other one is what we call a retention guarantee. And we'll discuss that as well. Now, if you think of guarantee, your listeners will probably think about something like a bank guarantee, where the bank sends a letter and says, I guarantee that Eon will pay $1,000 upon to do so. Now, this is something similar. So the contractor goes to a bank or insurance company. You've got quite a few in South Africa. You've got Guardrisk, Lombard, Santam has it in some of the banks as well. So the contractor goes, pays an amount of money, then that bank or insurance company will, which we call a guarantor, he will then issue a guarantee for normally 10% of the contract value. Now, 10% of the contract value doesn't seem as much, because if you think about it, you've got 100 million rand building project, and now there's a construction guarantee for 10 million. Now you might think, well, if I look at my own insurance, if my own insurance only pays out 10%, what am I supposed to do with that? Well, yes, but in construction it's a bit different. And the reason why it's different is that you don't get paid up front all your money in construction. So the contractor, as he builds, his work that he has done gets signed off. And then after it has been signed off, then he gets paid. So technically speaking, he will only get paid for the work that he's already done. So that 10% that you now have for the construction guarantee is to cover for things like penalties that might come later on, or if there's mistakes that has happened which you only at a later stage come to realize. But what makes a construction guarantee interesting is that, let's now say I'm the contractor and I now go to Guardrisk for argument's sake. I pay Guardrisk and Guardrisk issues me with this construction guarantee for 10 million rand. Now my employer's name is put on that construction guarantee, and then it becomes a contract between the guarantor and the employer. So it's not a three-party agreement to say you've got your contractor, you've got your employer, and you've got your guarantor. No, the contractor is removed from it. So this means is that, and normally you'll see, because those construction guarantees are fairly standardized as well. Over time it might differ and there might be a slight wording change or things to do, but they are fairly standard. And on that it will say that if the employer writes a letter to the guarantor to say that the contractor was in breach, for argument's sake, of his contractual terms, and I've now terminated the contract, then that guarantor has to pay the employer. Now, there is every now and then there's a contractor that jumps up and down and tries to stop that payment. Now, what we found is that there's been some cases where, well, I think I've probably been involved over the years on 5 or 6 guys that has tried to stop us where we appear on behalf of the employer. So what they do is the employer now, what they say, they call on the guarantee. So we write the letter to the guarantor, say we've cancelled the contract, you have to pay us now. And then that contractor runs to court and attempts to get an interdict to stop the guarantor from paying that money. Now, the reason why they always have failed, and there's one exception, one exception that they can try and do, and I'll explain that to you now. But the reason that they failed is that the purpose of the construction guarantee is that it needs to be like a cash check, cash in hand. So that if the employer now needs to rectify the building or complete the project, he has the necessary funds to do so. And that's the reason why. That's the whole purpose behind it. There's one exception, and that is in the case of fraud. So where this exception came from is many years ago. And it wasn't a construction guarantee per se, it was a letter of credit, but that works on the same principle. So what had happened was in terms of that letter of credit, when the goods were to be shipped overseas, once it is shipped, the buyer or the seller then can draw on that letter of credit. Like I said, the letter of credit is the same principle as the construction guarantee, and give it to the bank and say to the bank, now you have to pay me. But then what had happened was when those crates were opened up in the port, they realized that in essence it was useless. There was only some metal poles in there. So it was clear that the seller was trying to defraud the buyer. And that has withstand the test of time to say that's the only time when a court will interfere with a guarantee, with a construction guarantee, same as a letter of credit, if you can prove fraud. Now, contractors attempt to defraud the buyer, and then they have to pay the buyer. So the attempt to use that sometimes to stop the payment. But it's not fraud if the employer says that I'm of the view that you've breached the contract. Then it's not fraud. That is his view, which he is entitled to. Now, the nice thing, or the funny thing, if you'd like, is there's even been cases where it afterwards has been found that the employer wasn't supposed to, he wasn't entitled to cancel the agreement. And even then the court said, but that doesn't matter. The guarantor still has to pay. Now, one would say, well, where's your right of recourse then for the contract? Of course, remember the way that the construction guarantee works is that as soon as the guarantor pays the employer, the guarantor thereafter is going after the contractor to get his money back. So it's not really an insurance per se. I mean, because if you pay your monthly insurance in your car and you get in an accident and the insurance pays, the insurance doesn't come after you to get that money that he now had to pay back from you. But this is why this is a guarantee. So the guarantor merely says, okay, I will give you this 10 million. The guarantor then gives the 10 million to the employer and then goes after the contract. And of course, the contractor wants to avoid that by all costs. And another reason why they want to avoid it, I mean, without stating the obvious, of course, pertaining to the fact that he doesn't want to pay that 10 million, it is that once a construction guarantee has been drawn upon and that specific bank or insurance company, whatever, know of it, they will be very reluctant to again give you a construction guarantee. So employers sometimes use that guarantee sort of as a stick to say to them, look, well, if you don't do your work properly, I'll have no choice but to pull your construction guarantee, and then contractors runs around to make sure that everything is fine.
Jaco, you spoke about a retention guarantee. What exactly is that?
So the difference between the retention guarantee and the construction guarantee is that the retention guarantee, remember I said earlier that the builder will build a portion of the building or the project, and then once he's done that portion, he will submit it to the employer or the employer's agent, like the principal agent we spoke about, and that needs to be signed off. Now, let's say the work that is being signed off that is now completed is R1 million. Then the employer says, okay, in terms of the contract, I'm going to withhold 100,000 Rand of that R1 million as my retention guarantee. So the employer then withheld 10% of each invoice submitted. So if the contract is 10 million or 100 million Rand, and let's say there's 100 invoices of R1 million each, then by the time the contract nears its end, the employer will withhold 10 million Rand. So that is what we call a retention guarantee.
Okay, so Jaco, when will you have a retention guarantee, and then when will you have a construction guarantee?
So the parties agree up front in the contract on this. Now, most of the time it depends on the contractor, and the contractor will choose whether he will go and obtain a construction guarantee from a guarantor, or whether he would rather have 10% withheld of his invoices each month. Now, what I found with the contractors is that the biggest reason for them choosing the construction guarantee over a retention guarantee is that from a cash flow point of view. So yes, you pay up front for your construction guarantee, but then at least you know you're going to get the full amount of your invoice each month when you submit it. Now, the converse is also true. So sometimes a contractor maybe doesn't have a relationship or isn't that long in the business that he can be able to obtain a construction guarantee, and then what he will do is he would rather then go for the retention guarantee for the 10% to be held back.
Okay, and when will the contractor get his 10% retention guarantee back?
So that would normally be at the end of the project. So if everything is signed off and everyone is happy, which will normally be, depending on the contract, again, what they call works completion and that sort of thing. But this is a lot of times where we get contractors to come and see us, where they say, but the employer doesn't want to pay back the retention guarantee, and the employer says, but 1, 2, and 3 is the reason for that. And then, of course, the contractor says, but it isn't true. I did what I was supposed to do. And then they fight about the 10% retention guarantee. Because the reality as well is that their profit a lot of times sits within that 10% retention guarantee. So depending on how they quote it, it's very important for them to get that 10% back. So yeah, that's basically the difference between the retention guarantee and the construction guarantee. But it's very important for contract or employers, for that matter, to follow that construction guarantee to the letter. So if that construction guarantee says you have to send the guarantor a letter stating 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Then you have to use that exact words, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, so that the guarantor has no way to get out of it, and that they have to pay. So if your listeners are there that wants to know a bit more about construction guarantee in the construction industry, they're welcome to contact us.
Great. And then your contact details, of course, on the website. Just click on the banner, the Hahn and Hahn banner, and then chat to Jaco and the friendly team at Hahn and Hahn. Jaco, as always, a big thank you to you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and for teaching us about a construction guarantee. As they say, you learn something new every day.
No, for sure, Jon. Always a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Jaco.
Bye-bye.
Are you or your business in trouble and struggling to find a solution? Call Hahn and Hahn Attorneys, as we assist clients in finding solutions. We specialize in consumer and food law, commercial and construction law, forensic investigations, and administrative law. Visit hahnlaw.co.za. That's HAHN. We assist clients nationwide. Hahn and Hahn Attorneys, because we care. Don't miss Legal Talk with Hahn and Hahn Attorneys, Wednesday mornings at 10 on eRadio.